Are Catholics right? Did they really give us the Bible and decide which books belong in the Old Testament canon?
Yeah. Patrick O'Brien has recently put out another anti-Catholic video. This video is entitled, How We Know the Catholics Didn't Give Us the Bible. I spent 20 minutes listening to him ramble on about how essentially it was God who gave us the scriptures of the Old Testament, written by men ordained from God. He starts off by defining the meaning of the word canon and quotes Philippians 3:15, pointing out the English word used in a particular translation, standard, is translated from the Greek word canon. This Greek word is only found 5 times in the Bible. As you can see here, 2 Corinthians 10:13, verse 15, 16, Galatians 6:16, and then Philippians 3:16. He quotes from a Protestant book that I even used back in Bible college, From God to Us, How We Got Our Bible. Here's one of the quotes. Inspiration is the means by which the Bible received its authority. Canonization is the process by which the Bible received its final acceptance. Now, he uses this quote to explain how it was God inspiring the men who wrote the Hebrew Scriptures, and it was in that moment that the Scriptures became authoritative. Then he makes a jab at the councils that decided their inspiration and authority years later. He also quotes from the book that the process by which God gives his revelation is called inspiration. It is the inspiration of a book which determines its canonicity. God gives the divine authority to a book, and men of God receive it. God reveals, and his people recognize what he reveals. Canonicity is determined by God and discovered by man. I believe that too. But what do these quotes have to do with whether it was the Catholic Church or not that gave us the Bible? Then the next part Patrick points out is that the New Testament also authenticates the Old Testament as well. He points out that there are approximately 343 Old Testament quotations in the New Testament, as well as no fewer than 2,309 allusions and verbal parallels. 10% of the New Testament is actually made up of quotes from the Old Testament. But again, which Old Testaments are supposed to be in the canon or not? He only mentions 2, Psalms and Isaiah. Patrick starts talking about Josephus and the list of canonical books he lists in his Antiquity of the Jews. Many Protestants like to point this out and show that the Apocrypha books are not mentioned in his list. He also points out an early church father, Athanasius, I don't know how to pronounce his name, and his Fiscal Letter 39, pointing out the same number of books in comparison with Josephus' list. But what Patrick does not mention is that in Athanasius' list, the book of Baruch is mentioned along with Jeremiah. And in case you don't know this, but Baruch is not in the Protestant Old Testament. Now, a couple paragraphs down, Athanasius writes this. But for greater exactness, I add this also, writing of necessity, that there are other books besides these not indeed included in the canon, but appointed by the fathers to be read by those who newly join us, and who wish for instruction in the word of godliness. The wisdom of Solomon, the wisdom of Sirach, and Esther, and Judith, and Tobit, and that which is called the teaching of the apostles, and the shepherds. Protestant scholars hate to admit is the idea that the early church fathers who viewed the Deuterocanonical books of Scripture is even more evident in the writings of early church fathers, like Clement of Rome, Irenaeus, Athenagoras, Clement of Alexandria, Methodist, Cyprian, and Origen. Okay, so toward the end of the video, he finally gets to the point. God told certain things to certain men who then wrote these words down, the Jews. And the Jews kept track of the various writings down through the years. And when we get to the time of Jesus, Jesus quotes from these Old Testament passages, and the New Testament writers quoted verses from the Old Testament as well. So it was the Jews who gave us the Old Testament. Okay, I agree with all that. The issue I have with this video is Patrick never got around to answering the question that he posted in the beginning. Did the Catholic Church give us the Bible or not, particularly the Old Testament canon? Now, this is what I'm talking about, and I believe this is what the church is talking about as well. Where do we get this? Okay? Yes, the Old Testament was put together by the Jews. The New Testament was put together by the Christians. But how do we know which letter and which book that was supposed to go into this was supposed to go into this? Okay? So this is where the problem is. Patrick gave a nice little talk, but I'm going to mention some facts. Fact number one. There was no universally accepted canon of Scripture among the Jews in the 1st century AD. Now, instead, different sects within Judaism had divergent views of which books were inspired and authoritative. The Samaritans and Sadducees, although very different in their religious views and practice, were agreed that only the 5 books of Moses were divinely inspired scripture. The Pharisees, on the other hand, accepted a larger canon close to that of modern Jews and Protestants. It is also now apparent from the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Essenes accepted a larger canon of writings that have been given by Josephus, one that included certain apocryphal works like the Book of Jubilees and various Enochic books that are now found in 1st Enoch. Furthermore, the large numbers of Greek-speaking Jews scattered around the Mediterranean outside the land of Israel read the scriptures almost exclusively in the Greek translation known as the Septuagint, and accepted as inspired a larger collection than that of the Pharisees, one that roughly corresponds with the canon eventually accepted by the early New Testament church. Fact number 2. The canonization of the Jewish Old Testament took place sometime after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The Pentateuch, or the Torah as we know it today, was completed during the Babylonian exile by the time of Ezra. The Nevi'im, the prophets, were finalized during the Persian era, approximately 323 BC. The conclusion of the last section of the Bible, the Ketuvim, the writings, is debated. However, a majority of the scholars believe its final canonization occurred in the 2nd century AD. You can look this information up on the website that I mentioned down below. The Masoretic text, the authoritative version of the Hebrew Bible, began to develop around the 6th century AD and was completed in the 10th century AD by Masoretes, scholars at Talmudic academies in Babylonia and Palestine. Number 3. The writers of the New Testament quote more often from the Septuagint than the Masoretic text. The New Testament authors, including Jesus, often quoted from the Old Testament, and a significant portion of these quotations align with the Septuagint version rather than the Masoretic text. Scholars like Archer and Chinigigo have noted that the New Testament cites the Septuagint in approximately 340 places, while it cites the Masoretic text in only about 33 places. These include scripture passages from the 7 Deuterocanonical books in the Catholic Bible, but not in the Protestant Bible. For more information, you can look at those websites down below. Fact number 4. Based on historical evidence and documentation, the Deuterocanonical books were indeed a part of the canonization of the Old Testament and the New Testament books at the church councils of Rome, Hippo, and Carthage. You need to understand that during the first 100, 200 years in the history of the church, as well as back in the Old Testament, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of books that were written by various people and authors. Someone had to come up with the list of canon books that we now have in the Bible now that we have. So someone had to sort through all these documentations, records, letters, canons, and so forth, and put everything together into the Bible that we have today. And if it wasn't the Catholic Church, then what New Testament church or what other church was it? Please let me know if I'm wrong. Now, I want to close this video out by reading a quote from Jimmy Atkins' book, The Bible is a Catholic Book. It's going to be on page 168. Protestants must be frank with themselves. They have the Bible only because of the Catholic Church. They accept the books of the Bible that they do on the basis of tradition. And God guided the church to recognizing the canon it did by sorting through the true books of Scripture from the false ones. They wouldn't have the Bible if it were not for the Catholic Church. Jimmy Atkins. Patrick says that his next video is going to be on the Apocrypha. Well, I'm very interested in watching that and see what he says in that. There's more information I can obviously give about the Bible and the way it was put together. But I just want to leave it at this short time for right now. I hope you enjoyed this video and this presentation. I know my videos are not as professional as some of the other videos that you see with the other apologists, but I want you to know and understand that what I am talking about is factual information. It is true. You may disagree with some of it, but according to what I understand and the way that the Catholic Church teaches and directs the information and the teachings and the doctrine, this is all correct. This is Michael signing off for right now. I do wish you all have a good day, and thank you for tuning in and watching. Bye for now.